welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Ed Hajim, the son of a Syrian immigrant. He is a seasoned Wall Street executive with more than 50 years of investment experience, but his life didn't start out on that path. Matter of fact, he struggled to survive. Ed is the author of his memoir, On the Road Less Traveled, An Unlikely Journey from the Orphanage to the Boardroom. It's inspiring. It's powerful. You've got so much you're going to learn from Ed. Thanks for listening. And by the way, before you go, it'd be so cool. Could you go to my website, stephenmiletto.com, and maybe rate and review the podcast? Could you leave me a 5-star review and maybe some nice words of wisdom? Could you do that for me? There's a little microphone there that you can click on and leave a message for me. You can actually reach out using the contact page. You can look at all my podcast previous episodes that are there. You can also look at my blog articles, as well as look at other stuff that I have there, like a free audio class on classroom management. Well, it'd be cool if you did that. Thanks so much. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. Teaching, Learning, Leading K12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Ed Hajim, the son of a Syrian immigrant, is a seasoned Wall Street executive with more than 50 years of investment experience. He has held senior management positions with the Capital Group, E.F. Hutton, and Lehman Brothers before becoming chairman and CEO of Furman Cells. Hajim has been the co-chairman of ING Barings, Americas Region, chairman and CEO of ING Eltis Group and ING Furman Cells Asset Management. He is now chairman of High Vista, a Boston-based money management company. In 2008, after 20 years as a trustee of the University of Rochester, Hajim began an 8-year tenure as chairman of the university's board. Upon assuming that office, he gave the school $30 million, the largest single donation in its history, to support scholarships and endow the Edmund A. Hajim School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Through the Hajim Family Foundation, he has made generous donations to organizations that promote education, healthcare, arts, culture, and conservation. In 2015, he received the Horatio Alger Award, given to Americans who exemplify the values of initiative, leadership, and commitment to excellence and who have succeeded despite personal adversities. Ed, thanks so much for joining me today. Great to have you on the show, and say hi to everyone.
Thank you very much for having me on your show. I appreciate your time and energy in reading the book.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Your book is awesome, and it's amazing where you started and what you achieved in throughout your years, and just some note, the book is the format, the way it feels, the way it looks, the amount of pictures you have throughout it, and it also is just, it's engaging, and it makes you want to continue to read. So kudos to you on
Thank you very much. I mean, my children and my wife said you have to put this on paper, and we took a long time to do it. We got it done though, and it was a labor of love.
That's so awesome. All right, so let's start by talking about this. I've heard you say that this is something that you've noted before. My childhood disadvantages became advantages later in life. Can you just start with that?
It's one of the messages I want to get across to young people who have difficult starts and difficult backgrounds, because in many respects, there is some positives to that experience. The things you develop because you have disadvantages. Let me give this advantage. When I was in 15 to 20 different places in the first 18 years of my life, I developed adaptability. When you go from one schoolyard to the next, you learn how to adjust. When you go from one orphanage to the next, you learn how to adjust. You learn to find your place. You get adaptability, and that carries forward into your business career. You're able to change jobs. You're able to look at things carefully, and you actually start to embrace change, and you're not fearful of change. So that's one thing. You get adaptability. You get resilience because you go through these difficult circumstances. Once you're able to do that, you gain self-confidence and be able to handle difficult situations. In fact, I recommend you to people who have children in very good circumstances to put them into situations like Outward Bound and Knowles, where they have difficult situations that they have to handle alone. You also develop a certain level of self-confidence after overcoming a difficult period. So these are disadvantages that become advantages over a lifetime. You can also relate to all kinds of people because you've gone through these circumstances. And finally, one of the negatives is you develop anger because all those periods, you look around and you say, why me? Why am I in an orphanage? Why am I in a foster home? Why can't I have a bicycle? Why can't I learn to swim? These things that you don't get in a lifetime, like such a lifetime as I had. But on the other hand, if you can take that anger, which is energy, and direct it toward what's next and in your next achievement, instead of directing it externally. A lot of people use their anger externally. I drove it inside and basically helped me to achieve the things that I did. So those are some of the disadvantages. Malcolm Gladwell lays it out in his books that disadvantages become advantages. And I think that's really something that I'm trying to communicate to young people. In fact, a couple of young people, the Horatio Alger, I said, you're luckier than some of my kids because you've had disadvantages and you've overcome them.
That's so powerful. It's you're in your childhood. I mean, you've made reference to it now. I mean, you basically, you're in an orphanage and you're kidnapped by your father at one time. And, it's, you have all this stuff that goes on in your world. One of the other things that you've noted is that tough situations, hostile and abusive, taught me how to appreciate good times and handle difficult situations with less anxiety, which is what I think is so awesome. Let's go there for a minute. Well, it's when you're in a really difficult situation, and my first foster home was pretty awful. I mean, it wasn't quite Dickinsonian, but it was close to it. And once you overcome that, you develop something which is very important in life, is to be grateful for what you're given. And even in my life today, people ask me because of my age, how are you? I say, I'm grateful. And it's an interesting response. But that is one of the things that you get going through difficult circumstances. You really appreciate the good times. And in my life, of course, things continued to get a little bit better, and I continued to appreciate them. When I went to college, it wasn't the greatest start at all, but it was better than the orphanage. And so everything seemed to get a little bit better for me. And so basically, that's another one of the advantages you get going through a difficult childhood. Is you learn appreciation, and I would to this day I really wonder at how well I've done, and I really appreciate it, and I'm grateful. I also consider myself lucky and blessed. That's so awesome. In the middle of your book, and your book is called "On the Road Less Traveled." All right, and we're gonna delve into it a little bit more here. One of the things that and let me read the official title of your book, On the Road Less Traveled, An Unlikely Journey from the Orphanage to the Boardroom. And one of the things that you've mentioned already, but I'd like to go into a little bit more detail, is on page 115, you comment, the only constant in life is change. And that had some learning, had some teachings ready for you, all the shifting between schools or the places where you lived and so forth and so on. Can you talk about that? The only constant in life is change?
Well, this is interesting. Of course, my childhood, I was constantly changing. I was constantly changing from one foster home to the other, then across country, different hotel rooms, then a couple of orphanages. So, I was constantly changing and having to adjust to that change. And then when I went to college and the graduate school, I started to realize that, one of the successful experiences you have is the ability to see change before it occurs. And so change is the only constant. And leaving E.F. Hutton, for example, to go to Lehman Brothers, E.F. Hutton was a much more comfortable place to be, but they hadn't sensed the change that was coming in the business. The business was changing from retail, you sold to individuals, to institutional, selling to institutions. Lehman Brothers was taking that up. They were going to do that. And I knew I had to go there. And I went to Lehman Brothers, and institutional business did extremely well. And Hutton, when I left them, did relatively poorly because they stayed in the retail business. So I basically understood that. And at Furman Cells, given the fact that we weren't a large firm, we had to continue to change with the environment to exist. So if you didn't change, you're out of business. So I thought that was very important to me. And I really do believe that change is the only constant. And with technology doing what it's doing to society, understanding change is absolutely vital, because it truly puts you out of business. And of course, going to the University of Rochester and looking what happened to Kodak, you realize if you don't, even in the wonderful companies, if they don't pay attention to change, they're in trouble. So the fact is, that's the last line in my book. It says, what's next? I tell people that's what you have to think about all the time. And both anything I'm involved in, I always look to what's next. It's a simple expression.
I love that. That's, and Instead, a lot of people look at it as, oh my gosh, my world's disrupted, or my, I can I make this change? What's it going to do to me? That type of thing, as opposed to, what a great outlook on it, which is, what's next? That's cool. I love that. So, one of the things that in reading what's going on in your world and so forth, can you talk about the role that, like external partners or mentors or other people have helped play in your life as you've experienced it?
Here again, going back to my childhood, you learn as a person going through that kind of a circumstance not to trust anybody. And that's a huge mistake. And, but slowly but surely, I gained trust in people. There was a professor in my first year in mechanical drawing, which I was terrible in, that became a real mentor to me. He got me through mechanical drawing, but he also became a mentor in extracurricular activities, and we did all kinds of things together. And my professor, my senior chemical engineering professor, Dr. Sue, he basically taught me there was no question of whether you're going to do it or not. It's how much time you're going to spend doing it. And that's one thing I've always put to my employees. We're not going to decide whether or not we're going to do this. We're going to figure out how much time we're going to allocate to do whatever we have to do. But this is the kind of thing that is extremely important. And of course, the most important partner you get is what I call P1 or partner one, finding the right person to share your life with. If you can find someone to share your life with, and that you can support, and that she or he can support you, it's absolutely I've been married for 57 years, and she's involved in almost every decision. And basically, at points in time, she basically turned our life in the right direction. And Nantucket, I couldn't get into any of the clubs at all for some crazy reason. And she said, build a golf course. And sure enough, I went out and I built a golf course. And now we've changed the lives of 500 families over the last 25 years. We're the largest charity on the island. In fact, we may be the largest charity in the history of the island. And one of the great experiences I have now is when I walk up to the snack bar after the 9 holes, and the gal asks me, "What's your number?" I say, "Number 1," because I founded the club. But so she's been the big part. But there's 3 kinds of partners that I find are very important right across the board. One is a partner that can do things you can't do. You need that partner. In today's world, it's vital. The old days, there were 3 Lone Rangers, but today there aren't any. Second is to find someone who do things better than you do them. The third one is an interesting one. You could find partners that basically do things that you do really well, but you don't want to do. If you can find those 3 kinds of partners, either in one person or in a series of people, you end up doing things which you do well that you like to do. And that's essentially what Furman sells. That I was basically, I found a fellow that we worked together for 35 years. He did all the things I didn't want to do. And he also did a lot of things I couldn't do. And he hired other people to fill in my role. So my role, I got done. I was doing things that I really did pretty well and that I like to do. And of course, in the case of Barbara and I, the same way, we've sort of, division of labor. She does certain kind of things that she likes to do. And, when we build houses, I'm good at spatial relations, and I'm terrible at colors. And I stay out of the colors and I stay out of the fabrics and all that kind of stuff. So we built a couple of houses, and, it's a good partnership. But it's absolutely necessary today. Partners are vital in today's world, and especially in technology. Some of the things you're just not capable of doing. You've got to bring people who understand it. That's the right answer.
Oh, that's so awesome. This is, because everything there, and first I got to say, congratulations on you guys being married for over 50 years.
57 years. We have 3 children and 8 grandchildren, 7 grandsons. So it's quite an experience. Again, given that I had no relatives, nobody ever came to any of my graduations, this kind of thing. Now I have we go on a trip where we've got 16 of us, so that's really cool. Now that some of the oldest grandchild has a girlfriend, so we're 17. Nice.
So does that sometimes play into, the dynamics of the family? Is that, this is not something that you had, and you now have, you have this really cool.
No, it is cool, but my wife has done a good job of training me. I used to being part. She has a very warm and loving family with a brother. Her brother was one of my best friends. She teaches me how to, interact with the various parts of the family, and she does she makes sure that all the kids get their birthdays recognized and so forth. I'm not necessarily good at that because I never did it. So that's an important part of your partner. She picks up your weaknesses and supports them.
I love that. That's so powerful. One of the things that I'd like you to talk about or talk with us about is the idea that you really didn't have control in your life in those early days, as a kid and so forth, and as you're trying to figure things out. Can you talk about how this played a role in your desire to seek freedom as one of your goals?
Well, yeah, that's what I keep telling all of my young friends when I talk to them is to be sensitive to your genes. That's unfortunate, you can't do anything about that. But the way you grow up affects those genes. And basically, one of my goals was obviously to seek freedom, and also you find out that that's what you enjoy. And so I was willing not to go back after I left Lehman Brothers to another big prestigious firm. I went to a small firm where I had the freedom. I was the boss, and that was important. I could make the rules and make sure I followed them as well. But so that I wanted to seek freedom to make my own decisions, because as a child, I was trucked from place to place. I had no choice about anything that I did. And also, even at college, I didn't have a lot of choice. I didn't have enough money, so I had to work. But as soon as in the graduate school, I didn't work because I had a choice. And so that this was one of my what I call principles. Over a lifetime, you develop a series of principles that you want to follow, and that was one of my key principles. The most important principle still is the one that was taught to me in the Catholic Church, which is do unto others. I mean, that covers so much ground. But the second principle, or third principle, right down, is seek freedom. For me, other people want to seek organization. Each person has his own set of principles. That was one of my principles, and it came from not having control as a child. You're absolutely right.
That's so awesome. I appreciate you sharing that, because that, the idea of seeking some sort of stability and then to have the control that means that you're not dependent on others. I mean, I don't have to worry about you or your decisions I'm going to be making.
That's part, and you make those decisions, a fork in the road, and you can go one direction and you can go another direction, and one that has more freedom in it, may not have total freedom, because you move in that direction. And I think that's very, very important. It's the type of job you take. Is if you want to go in a direction. I suspect you also seek freedom. You're kind of your own boss in your job right now, and that's very important. To certain people. Other people would rather be in an organization and have different parts, different layers of management and so forth. My case, I still, very much desire. You can see my record from the boardroom. I've been the chairman of more firms than people say. You can't keep a job. You always be the chairman, but you can't keep a job.
Nice. It's funny. I mean, you're right. I mean, it's one of the things that, I like being able to have things that I make decisions about, that I have the autonomy to say, we're going that way. Well, okay. So
it determines how much, it depends how much money, energy, and time you're going to spend on acquiring financial resources too. I mean, one of my kids is, she works for a nonprofit. God bless her. That's what she wants. And she knows she's never going to be, she'll be financially secure, but she's not going to make a lot of money, because she decided. A friend of mine is a doctor, and he does spinal surgeries in Ethiopia. And he knows this is what excites him. And he's not going to ever, but you have to decide. And I, of course, didn't have financial resources. That's something I wanted, financial security. And I probably overdid it a little bit, but, it turned out okay.
Then that it did. A lot of what you just talked about is going to lead me into this, because, the title of your book is On the Road Less Traveled, An Unlikely Journey from the Orphanage to the Boardroom. And, there's a famous poem that's the road less traveled. And some of what you just talked about, I was wondering if
Robert Frost, it's in the book.
Yes. So I was wondering if you could talk about why this was your title.
Because many of the things I did, were basically on roads less traveled. Obviously my whole life is on a road. Not many people have traveled that same road. But even my road from engineering to business is a road a little less traveled than most. Going from, a very big firm like Lehman Brothers, prestigious, with a fancy dining room and great offices and so forth, going to firm and cells, that's a road a little less traveled. In today's world, being married 57 years is a road a little less traveled too. So I kept getting these, and my experience with female employees. If you look back, I really traveled there a road less traveled. I was the just going back, I was one of the first people to add women to the institutional business on Wall Street. I named the first vice president ever at Lehman Management Company who was a woman. At the Harvard Business School, I was the president of the Alumni Association. I helped name the first woman president of the Alumni Association. In fact, the Hajim School of Engineering and Applied Sciences has the first woman dean. So that's a road less traveled. Obviously, the golf course in Nantucket is definitely a road less traveled. Nobody thought it would be successful, and it was a road less traveled. So it kind of fit in. I also, Scott Peck was one of my favorite people as far as books were concerned. He made statements like, love is giving. Love is really defined by giving back to other people, and he had just wonderful, conversation. It's in my book. I basically copied him on a lot of things that I believe in. And, he did sell 20 million copies of his book. So I figured I'd piggyback on him a little bit.
Nice.
But Robert Frost was one of my favorite poets, and Scott Peck's one of my great writers. And so it sort of came to me one day. Also, in the book, it tells you the story. I walked into the Smithsonian, and here was this car it was almost exactly like the car that my father drove across country to pick me up and kidnap me. A 1936 Ford Roadster. And so the road less travel sounded very good. And by the way, this is On the Road Less Travel. Scott Peck's book is The Road Less Travel. So we didn't copy it exactly.
Gotcha. No, it's so powerful because of the choices that you make and the things that you do. I mean, you see, just like going back to that golf course again, you see the things.
Yeah, you say nobody does that. The idea, first of all, to find land on Nantucket was, nobody said there's no land for you. How you can do it. Then once I found the land, they said, you can't possibly. It's been too expensive, and we did it. And at Furman Cells, kind of many things we did. We started with 20 million revenues, ended up with almost $500 million. 70 employees, ended up at 800. A lot of things we did, people said you can't do because we were such a small firm. But we did them, and we traveled roads that people didn't travel at the time. And I think that's one of the things that I tell people is that if you want to be relatively successful, you're going to have to travel some pretty bumpy roads that people say are not possible, because there's where the opportunity is. And sometimes it's a dead end road too. No, it's not all success. Trust me.
That's interesting. One of the things you just said is that you run into people who say, "What are you, crazy?" Or "What are you? That's not going to work." Or how do you deal with that when you're thinking, "I got to go this way," and someone's telling you you're wasting your time?
I tell people to go to the yellow pad. I really believe in writing things down. And if you write things down, the reason why you do things. A young man said to me, "Ed, you're giving me too many ideas. Tell me one thing." I said, "Write down where you want to go and how you think you might get there." And then when you start to travel that road, if it turns out to be exactly as you thought it would be, that's fine. If it turns out not quite to be, if there's a turn in the road, it's not the end of the road if you have a plan. You know where you wanted to go and you can change it. And I did that constantly. In my life and in my business, I constantly pull out the yellow pad, write down exactly what I'm trying to do and why I'm trying to do it, and then maybe show it to a few people at the points in time. I've had mentors on Wall Street, a fellow who died recently, Wally Stern. I say, "Wally, what do you think?" But it was written. It was a written piece of information. When I went to Furman Cells, I wrote a 40-page document on what I was going to do with the firm, and I showed it to the guys in the firm. I said, "Here's where we're going," and they modified it. They changed it a little bit. Some people said it's not a good idea. And you see in the book, one fellow said, "You're going to drown in red ink." Well, he left. And it turns out that we didn't quite drown in red ink. We sold it for 3 times book and so forth. But that's another whole story. But writing things down is very, very important. It's a way of communicating with yourself, which is one of my real drivers right now. The second book is a whole book that really is a conversation with yourself. The only constant besides change, I think, is your inner voice. You carry that from childhood to death, and that conversation drives a lot of your decisions. And then writing it down so you can communicate with yourself is very important. I don't know, I can keep going on this because one of the things that happened is my father died suddenly in 1971, and we were semi-estranged. We communicated, a lot of writing going back and forth. But since he died suddenly, there was no closure. So first time in my life I went and got help. And the woman was brilliant, the Ackerman Institute in New York. And she said, what we're going to do basically is you're going to write your father letters and ask him questions. And then you're going to sit down and write those letters back, pretending that you're your father. I did that for 6 months, and it really kind of cleared things up pretty good because I put myself in his shoes, and I learned a lot more about him by having to do that. And that was again, here's a communications device that I think is very important.
That is awesome. I love that. That's, especially because, for feeling like you have something there that you'd like to at least ask, then you can also answer yourself. And
who's going to answer the question? The only person who can answer the question is you. You need to go back and put yourself in his position and try to answer those questions. And then one thing I didn't ask him was, what about my mother? Because I assumed she died. And I never asked him that question, which was kind of unusual. And of course, in the book, I found her after 57 years. So I don't want to give too much away in the book, but I want people still to buy the book and read it because it's important to me that there's a lot of little things in the book which are good. One of the things that I try to get across to people, if you really look at my life, one of the great things I did was I was never a victim. No matter it was my fault, there are points in time when it's my fault, I always moved the energy, instead of being a victim, using the energy to be a victim, be an energy to find out what's next. And that's really very important because that energy, you can use it up very quickly, aiding people and situations and so forth. We take that energy and say, what am I going to do next? What am I going? I made a mistake, or they treated me badly. Okay, in my case, the Lehman Brothers was terrible. I did everything right, and they still threw me out. But I figured what I was going to do next. It turned out to be my dream job, so it worked out well.
It's so inspiring, and also just the information, the thought that sometimes it kind of goes back to what we talked about before, when the idea that the challenges that you face, you kind of, the anxiety that some people create around, like being thrown out as the CEO at another company or something like this. I mean, instead you saw it as an opportunity. And
life has a flow to it, and I can't say that everything you do, it turns out the way it should. But when you come into a situation where you have to change, if you use that energy to just find out what's next, because it's hard to figure out what's next. It's not easy, but you have a certain amount of energy every day, and you got to use it the right way. And hating a situation or blaming other people is a worthless use of energy. Really, it really is. And if you use up energy, it's gone. You can't do it. So, in a sense, and in many respects, it's your fault. You've made some mistakes. You made a wrong choice. You worked for the wrong boss, or you picked the wrong industry, and you just got to go on. My daughter she got a wonderful dream job at Fortune, and she did very well there. But Fortune wasn't doing well. Print was going down, so she had to leave. And she found something that she actually liked a lot better. So it worked out well. In many respects, it's never easy, but it's important that you just try never to be a victim. You can be a victim for a while, a couple of days, but then get on with it because it doesn't do you any good.
Gotcha. So this is going to just really fit really well with something I want to ask you. If you had to, let's put you in a situation where you're getting ready to talk to an audience of high school students about achieving their dreams. All right. So the idea would be that they're the speaker. They're all coming in here and they're going to listen to Ed talk to them about what to avoid as they seek to achieve their dreams. What would you tell them?
I'm not big on avoiding. I'm big. I mean, this is one of the things I do I'm doing a graduation speech at the Keys College down here, and I've done many graduation speeches at Rochester, and I did Brunswick School last year, commencement address, and I pitched the same thing. Basically, it's what I call the 4 Ps: find your passions, find your principles, find your partners, and then find your plans. And that's what my second book is all about. I really believe that this conversation of those 4 things, that if you work on those 4 things, you'll get most of it right. And that's what I tell young people. Avoid being a victim for sure, all right? Avoid, also recognize fully your context. In other words, the difference between my life and my father's life. He was born in 1900, I was born in 1936. The last 40 years have been a unique period of history. You can do really well, not easily, but it was an easier period. Think of the period from 1900 to the end of the Second World War, Spanish flu, depression, war, and all that stuff. You're 45 or 50 years old. before you even can exhale, basically. And in our case, since 1983 till today, things have, 9/11 was terrible. There's no two ways about that. But just things like the stock market went from 600 in the Dow Jones to 33,000. I mean, the wind was at your back. So, and I mean, when, in my situation at Furman Cells, our sales went up 20 times. But while they were going up 20 times, the stock market was going up 10 times. So we did a good job. We had the wind at our back. And that's what I tell young people. I say, try to find a place where you can find a trend or a theme or a wave where the wind is at your back. And not necessarily one that's totally financial. My friend who's the surgeon, he could have gone any place because he was a specialist in curvature spine. He went where there was huge demand and no supply. He went to Ethiopia. And he was, I guess, one of maybe two people that could do what he could do. And if you look at his brochure after 20 years, he has changed and saved so many lives because he was in a place where there was great demand for his services. So I tell young people that go through your passions, and passions is an overused word, talents, interests, and so forth. But passions are very important. What do you really want to do? And then principles, And so I'm pitching this in the book. The book spends all the time. Principles. What lines won't you cross? What rules do you want to follow? And, being brought up in a Catholic school was pretty easy. They told you that if you went this way, you go to the good place. You went the other place, you go to that other place. And so they established it very early. And the golden rule was taught by the golden ruler. And, you learned it pretty easily. But the principles go on through entire lives. I mean, I can spend a lot of time on this because I think it's vitally important. For example, my passion turned out to be to help people do better than they thought they could. The principle with that was, a principle I added to that is that you can accomplish almost anything if you don't care who gets the credit. And take the principle a little bit further. Start to deflect credit. Have some fun, Steve. Next time somebody says, Steve, you did a great job, think of somebody who helped you do that job. And to the person who has to say, Mary Jane, she was the really one who helped me to do this. Three things happen magically. First of all, the person who asks the question will say, boy, this guy is paying attention. Second of all, you feel good. And then when Mary Jane finds out, she's going to feel good. So that's the one thing that these are what I call principles. And they're simple principles because if you think about deflecting credit, it becomes a principle. So when anybody says something to you, you say, like I got interviewed by a fabulous lady, and they were all raving about my interview. And I said, no. Without Barbara, it wouldn't have worked because she really had the questions. And Steve, by the way, your questions are delving, you're making me better than I should be.
Well, thank you. You're too kind, but this is awesome. I love your answers. This is just so cool being able to talk with you about this. I got to say this. Toward the end of your book, On the Road Less Traveled, you note this: I haven't found the Holy Grail, and I haven't achieved every one of my goals, but I've experienced something almost amazing. I've lived the American dream. Many think of it as a cliched, outmoded concept. Believe me, it isn't. It's alive and well. Could you talk about that?
I just think that America is still, the opportunity today is greater than it's ever been. Remember, in my era, or my father's era, there was a lot of prejudice. Prejudice has been cut way, way back. All right. Scholarships, there were, there were one or two scholarships I could have gotten out of high school. Today, they're just loaded with scholarships. So that, in addition, in a business, and when I went into business, you needed capital. You had to build steel plants or oil refineries. Today, with a stroke, if you want to start a business and go on the internet, you can get it done in a hurry. So enormous opportunities. And technology basically is putting a lot of old industries out of business that gives you more opportunity. Plus, education has gone to the next step. Everybody criticizes education, but education is better now than it's ever been. And by the way, when I got out of school, I wanted to be an international businessman, but I was too early. Today, you have the whole world open to you. So I think there's enormous opportunity, and America gives you that chance. Other countries, not so much. We still can, you find entrepreneurs today that are being successful or people that, start from almost nothing. So it's still available. The American dream is still alive and well. It's not as simple as it was before, and we may not have quite the 40-year period, which I had to be lucky enough to live in that particular period. But I still think that today, young people have huge opportunities and, to live and enjoy and to produce. And I think that's why I say my 4 Ps fall into the four categories of life. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but I believe that self, family, work, and community are the four things you have to pour those four P's into. And community is my word for giving back. And so if you take these four P's and end up satisfying those four parts of life, then I think you're going to feel pretty good when it's all over. Or when you're 86 years old and you're on to your last, 2 holes in the golf course, and you're basically doing what you really somehow found you should do, which is to write a book and tell people about it so that you can help them with the tools. So you asked a question, which is the most important. What would I tell young people? I want to give them those tools that will allow them to at least have a chance of being successful. And also, I want to maybe level out a few of the early bumps, if I can, that people make, standard mistakes. But this is my goal now. And this is my, what's next for me is to get these books out, and hopefully I'm getting responses which really paid the price. A woman wrote me the other day and said, her daughter was confused, didn't know what to do. Now she's in college. I got another lady, a freshman at Notre Dame, that wrote me and said, I read your book and this is why I'm here. So I'm getting those kind of returns, so it's worthwhile. Jen, you should have stopped me. The answer was too long for the question. So.
No. Thank you for talking like that. Because this is so powerful. I mean, one of the things that we have so often is the voice that says, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. And I'm talking internal voices. I'm not talking about outside. I'm talking about people saying,
no, it's internal voices. That's why I say that my next book is basically a conversation with yourself. Ask yourself what your passions are, and then figure out whether they fit with today's world. How do they fit with your talents? How do they fit with, and also, how do they fit with your partner or partners? It's very important that your partner and you have somewhat the same passions and the same, not necessarily same passion, but the same principles. Or you find out that, you can't, if you have a good partner and you have the same passions and principles, you go a long way toward getting things done, and also support. It's very important to have support, not only your own inner voice, but somebody who's with you all the time, who's willing to pay attention to your strengths and your weaknesses. So those are the kinds of things. But today you have to have that voice inside you that says, it can be done. Again, as a child going through difficult circumstances, and many times you had to say, I'm going to get through this. And so that there is some luck in having a difficult circumstance. And you're right, the people who basically spend the whole time, 12 years in one school and one neighborhood, it's great. But when they come up against difficult situations, they have more anxiety than I have. I mean, when I got to difficult situations, I said, hey, I've seen this before, and I've gotten through it before.
Love it. I love it. Love it. Love it. What awesome advice, what awesome thoughts that you're sharing with your readers, and can't wait for your next book to come out. And, but I got a couple last questions that I want to ask you. And, but before we do that, if someone wanted to connect with you or learn more, where would you send them, Ed?
Well, first of all, the books, and there is a website. The word Hajim is a very unusual name. There's nobody. The customers made it up when my father came over. But so Ed Hajim, www.edhajim.com gives you my website, and my publicist has done a great job. It's a very robust website. Tells a lot about me and so forth, and all the things. It has some of these principles laid out a little better than even I explain them. So it's, again, writing things down. You can be much more. You bring more clarity to your ideas than when you talk about them. And and read the book. And the second book is going to come out April 4th, and I think that really tells the whole story. You can email me. I'm at edhajim, at gmail.com. So that's easy enough. And I've answered a lot of emails. In fact, on the book, I could write a book on people telling me about themselves after they've read my book, because they relate to different parts of it. So that's really wonderful. I mean, I think I'm collecting all these emails from people. I may someday write a book about their responses, because, one fellow said, I'm an orphan. He said, I've only told 3 people in my life. You're the third. So, it's kind of things like that are kind of really humorous. So I'm getting a lot of good feedback from the book, which is worthwhile. I went on this venture not knowing how it would turn out, because publishing, as you may know, is a terrible business. I mean, my publisher is a wonderful person. He's done a great second book. The quality of the book is even better, but he does take, a very large percentage of anything that, we generate. This is not a profitable venture, that's for sure.
Well, I'm glad you're taking a chance to share because, yes, I understand, and it would not be.
Well, sharing this community thing that I say, a fourth part of life. If you don't do things, you don't give back. It's the greatest satisfaction ever. I mean, there's a young lady up at the University of Rochester who was an optics engineering major, and she just got her PhD and she got married and so forth. And she stood up on a stage and said, "Wasn't for you, Mr. Hajim, I wouldn't be here." I mean, come on, that pays all the bills that you ever spend. I mean, or any effort you ever. That single thing, in my mind, took care of anything I've ever done at the University of Rochester.
That's so awesome. I love it. Ed, we're getting ready to wrap up. And by the way, I'll have your website in my show notes, and which will be awesome. And so that people can just right there from their mobile phone, if they're listening to me on that, they can just go and click on it and go there and take a look at what you have to say on the website. So good stuff. And I'll also put your email address there in the show notes too. So, last two questions that are just general questions I like to ask my guests. And the first one goes like this: how do you keep going when so much is going on that you may want to quit?
That's, there was one, there's probably a gene. I have a lot, unusual amount of energy, but I feed off the things that I do. And, I was lucky enough to have this sort of thought process or passion that when people do better than they think they can, it gives me energy. When I watch someone who's, doing something that I've helped he or she do, that really gives me energy to go forward. I also feel that, this is what I'm put on the earth for, is to basically, to do things that will make the world a better place. At Rochester, we had something called Meliora, ever better. Leave the place ever better. Any place you go, try to leave it a little bit better. And when you do that, you get energy from it. I mean, I think that's in Nantucket. The symbol on my shirt when we first got there was not, well, what are we doing putting a golf course on Nantucket? Now people come up to me and say, my daughter is now at college because of your club. Last year we gave 10 vocational scholarships, which is a whole other crusade that I have right now, as I feel that we really should be sponsors for vocational education. We have a young fellow who want to be a chef. Costs $40,000 a year to go to Johnson Wells, and he worked in our kitchen all summer long. He loves it. So I want kids to find their passion enough to go to college as such. They can become nurses or marine engineers or hospitality workers and live happily. My electrician and my plumber, every day they do wonderful things for people, save people's lives, And so, or the guy who fixes my computer. I mean, without him, I don't know, I always compare, my doctor gets annoyed when I say this, but when, if I don't feel well in the morning, my computer's down, more important thing is my computer.
Yes.
And so, Ryan comes over and fixes my computer. And even though I'm not feeling well, I'm now in good shape. I can live through the day.
That's awesome. I love it. All right. Last question, Ed. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? And what would you say if given the chance to say thank you?
Oh, I think that these two professors at the university, Oscar Miner, who basically caught me early in my career. First year at the university was terrible. I got rejected by all the fraternities, and I was a star student in high school, and I got there and I found out that they made it more difficult. I got into my math class where I never got less than an A. All of a sudden, I found I wasn't doing that well. My first English paper was a C. Professor said, write very well, and then mechanical drawing, I couldn't do it. He just grabbed me and said, "You'll be okay, and I'll take care of you. I'll be your person." And he basically followed me all the way through. I ended up being the chairman of the finance board, which gave out all the money of the school's activities, and he was the faculty advisor, and he just helped me all the way through. He was a great, great human being. Then in my senior year, I worked for Dr. Sue, who basically worked with me, and he gave me just the ability to understand and how to handle problems. The concept of observe, design the program to figure out the problem, execute that, and then analyze, and then reprocess. What I call the engineering process. Dr. Sue was fantastic. But there have been mentors. I mean, it takes a village. I mean, all my life I've had people that have helped me. Wally Stern, who was about 10 years older than I on Wall Street, and I would go to him constantly to teach me the business. So, but those two teachers at university. There was also a professor at Harvard who gave me the last piece of my management puzzle, Hugo Eiderhoven, who was a champion in developing strategy. And basically, He convinced me that this was the most important thing you could do. And I ended up with my own process. When I took on a management problem, I dealt with culture, strategy, and people long before I worried about the numbers. And that really made me a very different manager. Culture and strategy were so important to me. And Hugo, who's passed away recently, he really was a professional. He took a situation and he said, this strategy will work and this strategy won't work. Why? And I carried that through my entire business life.
That is so awesome. Thank you so much. Ed, thanks for sharing your book, On the Road Less Traveled, An Unlikely Journey from the Orphanage to the Boardroom. I mean, what a powerful and inspiring story. Thanks so much for talking with me and wishing the best in all you do.
Steve, thank you for your questions and for your time and for your energy. It's been a really good experience. Thank you very much.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.